Hello and welcome everyone to this week's episode of the podcast. Today I'm joined by the wonderful Anna Campbell. Many of you guys will know Anna. She is the community manager at Jewelers Academy, but she is also, like me, a metal clay addict. She is a metal clay tutor. She does lots of her own training in metal clay as well over the years. And today's topic, which we're both very passionate about, is 10 reasons to fall in love with metal clay. And as you guys know, we have recently launched a brand new diploma, a year-long diploma in silver metal clay. So this is just kind of for anybody who's interested generally in what metal clay is and how it works. And we just thought there's so many reasons why we love working with this material that we wanted to share with you guys. So hopefully you'll learn lots in this session. And those of you that are already metal clayers may also learn a thing or two. And of course, if you're interested in joining the diploma, we'll put the sales page in the link so that you can have a check and sign up. We've done an open day session. Hopefully a lot of you guys made it. If you didn't, there is a replay, so you can click on the link as well to get that. And finally, we have a fun challenge for the community next week, so starting next Monday, which is 5 days of silver metal clay. And lots of you guys joined in with the 10 days of silver jewelry at the beginning of the year. So this is a slightly shorter version for metal clay, and it's a wonderful thing to do kind of over Easter, over the Easter break, which is obviously 5 days of making with silver metal clay. And we've got some free training for you guys. It's a completely free challenge. There's lots of information and resources on the tools and materials that you need, as well as some fun projects to get involved with. So do check that out. You can either do all 5 days or you can just pick and choose, but it's a really lovely way for the community to come together and just get creative with some making. So lots of metal clay things going on at the moment. So welcome, Anna. Thank you so much for coming and joining us on the podcast today.
Oh, I'm always excited to talk about metal clay. It's something that I'm just still obsessed with since I first started using it. I actually went to a one-day course at the London Jewellery School in 2010.
Awesome.
2010. I was just checking when it was. And that was it. I was completely hooked. And in actual fact, on Facebook, I've seen my future and it's metal clay that day. And I was like, that's definitely for me. And I just loved it so much. I did all of the different qualifications that you can do. And I started teaching myself for the London Jewellery School. And also you'll find me in some of the Jewelers Academy metal clay courses as well. So yes, I am well up for talking about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I had a similar experience where the first class I did, I was like, that's it. This is what I'm doing now. And I've done silversmithing, kind of traditional methods before, and I still love those. But as soon as I touched metal clay, and I think it's one of those things that, you just fall in love with it when you start working with the material. I was like, I can be really expressive here. I can really be creative, and it feels like there's almost no boundaries, although there are some, especially with cost nowadays. But we'll get into all of that. But yeah, it was just that moment where you're like, I found my thing. And I'm sure lots of other metal players will feel the same. So if you are new, you're thinking, what on earth are they talking about? We will explain a little bit more, but also I just really encourage you to buy some and to try it and to do the free challenge if you've just never heard of any of this before, because it is a wonderful, wonderful material to work with. So today we have 10 reasons. We actually had to cut a few down because we had more than 10. We were like, let's go with 10 to begin with. So the first one is that it is easy to do from home. So Anna, do you want to talk a little bit about why this is one of the reasons why we love metal clay?
Yeah, the thing with metal clay is that it's a manufactured material, and it's something you get it in a packet. It's just there and it's pre-ready, pre-sorted out for you. You don't need to mix it or anything like that. It's ready to go. But what's great about it is that you don't need a lot of tools and equipment to get started. And in actual fact, the original artist that started working with this metal clay in the 90s when it got started, it was part of their ethos actually to kind of just use what they had in the house, to use some of the tools, not have to make new tools and equipment and things like that, but actually to use equipment and things that they already had. And so there's very little that you need. Of course, with every hobby, there's lots of things you can buy and we get there, but at least to start with, there's not so much that you need. And a lot of those things you might have at home. There's things like a clay roller, just, you know, a piece of plastic to just roll it out onto, some playing cards to make sure that the clay is evenly rolled out. So there's, when you see the challenge, you'll see some of these things, and it really isn't that much. And I think there's a few things around that. First of all, you know, it's a lot of, you can try it without kind of really investing and going for it to start with, because you can do a lot of the things that you want from home. But also, you know, you don't have bulky equipment, you don't have necessarily expensive equipment. It's not always about the money. Sometimes it's just about, I don't have space for another hobby. But actually in this case, you know, a lot of what you need can be kept in a really small box, and it's easy to do from your kitchen table, like really.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the things that drew me to it at the beginning, because when I first started making jewelry, I didn't have a lot of space and I was a little bit nervous about investing in some of the tools that I just wanted to like ease myself in. And you're right, there's like playing cards. I think I had like some olive oil and a sponge. I remember actually doing a metal clay class years ago, and we had all this stuff out, and we were in this big kind of cabin, and it was like see-through, and we were like, if people walk past, they're going to think, what on earth are they doing? Because it's such a random selection. We had some like leaves and things for textures, like bits of bark and various things, and it was, it's kind of really interesting. And I think the playing cards always throw people. I know we do some metal clay in our Silver Diploma courses, and we send them out these huge kits with everything they need, and they'd be like, are we playing poker at the end? Like, why have we got a set of playing cards? But I think it can be really accessible, metal clay. And one of the points coming up later kind of talks a bit more about that as well. Spoiler alert. But yes, it's something that you don't need a lot of space. You don't need a lot of heavy tools. It's quite easy to carry. So very accessible to kind of get started with. So that is our first reason that we love it. Second reason, it's eco-friendly. So this is something that has become more and more kind of conscious in people's awareness. All of us pretty much want to have eco-friendly businesses as much as we possibly can, and metal clay massively lends itself to this. So Anna, do you want to talk a bit more about why metal clay is eco-friendly?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first, there are lots of different reasons. And of course, as with everything, there are always pros and cons, and there's always, you know, good and bad sides. But I would definitely say that this goes definitely more towards the positive side. First of all, the silver particles are recycled. They're 100% recycled. And I was lucky enough to go to one of the talks from one of the Japanese masters that came over to talk about all about this, so I knew all about where it all comes from. I won't bore you with it all, but it's recycled from wherever they can get it, really. They go to hospitals and reclaim X-rays that have been printed because they use silver nitrate. It's reclaimed from the photographic industry where they process photos. It's reclaimed from electronic devices. You may have seen that the Japan Olympics, all of the medals were reclaimed gold, silver and bronze, and that is it's manufactured in Japan, so it's all part of that ethos. So even apparently the back windscreen of your car has silver in it to stop it fogging up.
Crazy.
That doesn't mean you should smash it, but I'm just saying there's another place that they're reclaiming it. So they're getting it from wherever they can reclaim it from. It's then put with a plant-based binder, so that's 100% organic plant-based binder, to make it like a clay, so to bind those particles together, and a little bit of water. So it is recycled silver. And another one which probably is coming up as well is that there isn't any waste with it too. So that really helps in terms of being able to use every little scrap, every little drop, every bit of dust. We can use it all up.
Absolutely. I love that about metal clay. And, you know, because often when you're working with sheet metal, and, you know, we love working with sheet metal too, but you have to cost for the whole, if you're sawing out, say, a circle on a pendant, you need to cost for the square of that. Because even though, yes, you can recycle the silver, it is quite a process, it takes time, and there are costs involved. Wonderful thing about metal clay is, you know, so it's a clay, so you roll it out, you can work with it. It does dry out, but there's ways to reconstitute it very easily. So it can easily be used again. Every speck of dust you can kind of scrape together and reconstitute it back into the clay. So there is literally, and that brings us on to point number 3, why we love it, is there's no waste. So even though, and people often ask this a lot, so even though the clay costs a little bit more per gram, so if you were to measure like sheet silver versus metal clay, the cost would be higher per gram. At the moment, things are always changing, but generally speaking, that's been the case. It's kind of evened out for 2 reasons. One, because there is no waste, so you can use every bit, and not only you can, but it's just very natural too. It's a very easy process to use all of it, so you will be using all of it. But also, making things out of metal clay is quite quick. So not always. I mean, there are processes involved, and it's very different pattern of working to working with traditional methods, because you're obviously molding it and sculpting it and it's soft, and then you leave it to dry for a little bit, and then you're sort of sanding and refining it, and then you fire it, and then you kind of do your final polishing. But generally speaking, to make a like for like piece, and you wouldn't make the same design in traditional, you would always do something that lends itself to that material, and they both have their own real strengths. But generally speaking, you can make pieces a lot quicker, and therefore the overall cost, I would say it works out about the same. It certainly wouldn't be more expensive to work in metal clay. And that really comes down to your production and what kind of pieces you're making. If you're making collections, sometimes people will make something in metal clay that takes a really long time, and then they will get it cast and kind of have it in, for example, if you need it in sterling, we'll come on to this in a bit, but metal clay is fine silver jewelry, so it is a little bit softer than sterling, but it is also higher up the preciousness scale, so in terms of value it's worth a little bit more, but there's ways that you can kind of combine and work with both methods together. So, but yeah, back to the original point, there is no waste, which is awesome.
That's definitely true. We'll share a video. I did a video on how to reconstitute your clay, and what I love is that you just, like you're saying, when you're sanding the piece and you've got some dust, you can kind of keep that and put it in a little pot. If you make something and you look at it and you go, that wasn't quite right, that's not exactly what I want, I kind of have this little pot and just keep all the little bits in it. And then it's really quick to reconstitute it, make it back up into clay. And as you say, then I could just use it exactly in the same way again. So it's no-brainer. No-brainer. It's awesome. Which brings us on to point number 4. So as I've mentioned, silver metal clay is fine silver and it can be hallmarked. So for anybody who doesn't understand the hallmarking process, I know I didn't before my first class, is generally speaking, sterling silver is hallmarked 925, which means to every 1,000 parts, 925 parts are silver. The other alloys such as copper and zinc, which gives it its strength. So metal clay, silver metal clay, gives fine silver, which is hallmarked at 999, which means to every 1,000 parts, 999 parts are silver, and 1 part is other alloys potentially, or is who knows what the 1 part is. But you can get your metal clay jewelry hallmarked at 925 if you would like to, because it is a lower hallmark. You are allowed to do that because they do understand that a lot of consumers don't know the difference, and will recognize 925 and be like, that means it's silver, and anything else could look a bit they're not sure about. But it is fine silver, which is awesome. And it's just a slightly different material to sterling. So it's worth kind of, understanding that. And again, using each material to its strengths. It's beautiful for pendants, for earrings. We do also make a lot of rings, but they need to be kind of considered because it is a finer material in terms of what kind of pieces are going to work really well for it. But I love, and when I first came across metal clay, I was like, so this is actually silver, because it kind of feels like it won't be, doesn't it, Anna? Yeah, when you first look at it, when I'm teaching, I love the moment where you look, kind of show it, and you're like, what? How can that be silver? And no, you know that's what you're doing. But until you actually go through the magic part of turning it into silver, it still is a bit like, I think once you've gone through the process once, and that's one reason definitely to try the challenge, because I think you really get your head around it once you've gone through that process of making a piece from start to finish. And that does really, really help with it. But yes, yeah, absolutely, I completely agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Okay, so that was number 4. It's fine silver jewelry. You can hallmark it. Awesome. Number 5, it's easy on your hands. So do you want to talk about this one, Anna?
Yeah, I also started out trying more traditional methods of silversmithing, and obviously we have amazing diplomas and amazing goldsmiths and silversmiths that work with us. But for me, I found the physical nature of it, I didn't really get on with it as well. And I was fortunate because somebody on my silversmithing course said, have you heard of metal clay? And I hadn't. But it is a very different way of working. Just as making in wax is a very different way of working. So these are all ways of making jewelry from metal, but just, you know, in a different method really, and they lend themselves to making metal and making silver jewelry in different kinds of ways, I would say. But there's less of that physical nature that can be associated with sawing and hammering and all of that kind of side of traditional silver and goldsmithing. So if you do have any dexterity issues, or you know, if mobility is a little bit of an issue for you, or if you're just a bit like me and you're like, well, I'm not sure if I'd get on with that as well, it's definitely worth trying, because we are talking about using something that's very soft, and you know, working and manipulating that, which is a little bit different from using sheet silver or wire, which is quite hard.
Absolutely. I've not had any metal clay related injuries. Let's put it that way. And I've had many with traditional silver methods, but I mean, I love them both equally. So, and I see them as just different things, but certainly, you know, there's times where I've been stone setting and slipped, and that's been very painful. And, you know, those kind of things. So I always feel like I have to be much more alert when I'm working with the tools in traditional methods, which is important. We should all be alert. Whereas metal clay, I just find it a very relaxing experience. And when I'm teaching as well, you know, teaching traditional silver, I'm a little bit more like checking, you know, everyone's all right. Whereas teaching metal clay, we're all just like sat with our cup of tea, like kind of just chilled. And it's just a different nature. And I think that, you know, it's nice to do both, because you can have that variety in your work, you can have that variety in your designs, and you can also have that variety in your kind of state of being, I suppose, is how I relate to it. But certainly if you've tried traditional silver and you feel like, I wish I could do that, but it just doesn't fit with me, this may be the thing for you. Yeah, so easy on your hands, easy and gentle on your hands. Number 6, and I've kind of been alluding to this already, and it's one of the things I'm really passionate about actually, is it really complements traditional methods. So I've seen quite a lot in the past where there's like different camps, like I'm either a metal clayer or I'm, you know, I work in traditional methods, but I think they go beautifully together. And I feel like this is an area that hasn't been explored as much as it could be. So for example, silver metal clay can be soldered. So you can create things, I'll often create something and solder it onto a ring blank that's made in traditional methods, because, you know, rings are a bit more challenging in metal clay. Or if you like to add decorative elements, if you're a traditional silver worker, but you'd like to add in like, you know, leaves or flowers or shells or something a bit more expressive that's harder to do in the sheet metal, it can be done, but it's quite a process. Metal clay, sometimes you know, it's really simple to get those kind of more expressive elements, and they can just be soldered on. So I know, like in our 1 year silver diploma, a lot of people make the trinket box, which is this beautiful kind of silver trinket box. It uses lots of traditional metal, lots of soldering. And then often on top, not always, but often they'll put like a metal clay charm, and just little details like that. And the same on rings or pendants or earrings. You can combine them and create something that's, you know, kind of mixes those two worlds. So yeah, that's a good one.
Definitely. I think metal clay generally lends itself very much to, because you can mold and shape it, to that more sculptural side. It's very easy to texture it. I did a project where I did 100 different textures in 100 days, and there's so much you can do with the metal clay, and it's easy to do as well. So if you do like that kind of botanical look where you can get leaves and seed pods and things like that, metal clay really lends itself to that. Also lends itself very well to making pressing into molds. There are ways of casting, of course, other metals, but with metal clay it really is the case of just squish it into the mold. It's really straightforward. So as we say, there are benefits to the different methods of working with metal, and for silver clay that's one that's a real benefit.
Absolutely, and it can be combined to great effect as well, which is one of the reasons why we put a bit of silver clay in our silver diplomas as well, and we put a little bit of traditional methods in our metal clay because they do work really well together. But a lot of people ask, can it be soldered? And yes, once it's fired, it is fine silver jewelry, so it can be polished, it can be treated in exactly the same way you would treat any piece of fine silver.
Yeah, absolutely. You can solder stud earrings or cufflinks. You could solder on a bezel and do bezel setting in the traditional way. There's, once it's silver, it's silver.
It's happened. And I think as well, you can think about, if you're running a business, whether or not you want to communicate that it is metal clay. That's always optional. I mean, it's great to share about it and to get the word out, but some people worry that it's just a lot to, consumers don't know. And honestly, usually they don't care. They're just like, is it real? Do I like the design? Am I attracted to it? Do I want to wear it? And that's kind of it. So it's a bit like wax carving. You can share that process, and it's quite nice to share it in your stories and in your reels and all of that. But on your sales pages or on your kind of checkout elements, it's just silver. So it's up to you kind of how much you want to share it. And it does lend itself really well to jewelry businesses. A lot of you guys may have seen we had a fingerprint jewelry class out. That's in the diploma in metal clay as well. And I used to run a fingerprint jewelry business, which is, use metal clay. You literally put a fingerprint into the clay. There's a little bit of a process to it, but it's very straightforward. And, really lends itself to personalized jewelry as well, being able to engrave, being able to stamp letters, put in little birthstones, those kind of things. So it's very commercially viable, I would say, in that way. So yeah, which kind of leads us a little bit, some of that leads us on to point 7, which we love metal clay because it is very creative. It's very expressive. And like Anna mentioned, it's easy to mold and sculpt. So if you feel like you have designs in your head that you want to realize and you're not quite sure how to, if they are a little bit more out there, if they are a little bit more, you could almost like feel them in your hands and you'd want to like shape something, this is the material that's going to help you to do that. And I think we all have different ways of working. Some of us are very kind of more mechanical. Some of us, with wax, like to start with something big and take it away. Some people find that impossible. They're like, how do I take away? I need to build up. So until you try these things, you don't really know what's going to feel good to you. But what I love about metal clay is kind of the gentle build up. And, like Anna said, you can add textures and so many things you can do with it. But yeah, that creative element. How do you feel about that, Anna?
Yeah, I was just going to say that as well. I think one of the things, I think people have different ways of designing and coming up with ideas. And one of the things I love about the metal clay is that I can kind of come up with a plan A, but very, very quickly I can change my mind. And sometimes I'm that kind of person who needs to design by doing, if that makes sense. I'm not so much a sketcher. I like the model making and all of that kind of stuff that you can do. And I think the metal clay really lends itself to that because I don't have to be too precious about it. If I saw something, that's done, but if I make something in the metal clay and I don't like it, I can squidge it up, or if it's dry, I can reconstitute it. I can have that more kind of experimental feel around what I'm doing, and that is how I personally prefer to work.
Yeah. Although I remember sometimes teaching classes and I'd have to remind people to breathe while they're working with the clay. I'd be like, it happens sometimes. You have a vision, you roll it out and you try and do something and it doesn't quite look how you thought, and you're like, quick, start again, do it again. And it's sort of like, breathe, it's okay. But it's quite exciting to work with because you literally see it form before your eyes. And I think it's so versatile as well. That's probably one of my favorite things, is the versatility of it. And if you look at, different people, different metal clay artists, and we have lots on the diploma who are very, very different. The collections and the art, and it is art, the art that they come up with is so different to each other. We'll talk a bit more about, some of the tutors, but someone like Anna Campbell, who does really sculptural, beautiful, detailed work. And then you have someone like Joy Funnel, who's all about color, enamel, bright, every color of the rainbow is there. And then you have, people like Tracy Spurgeon, who I always think of as quite construction based, and, hinges and sort of, boxes and quite detailed measurements and that kind of stuff. So it can kind of really fit your personality, I think, in a way that, a lot of materials, perhaps wouldn't be as versatile as that. So yeah, very expressive.
Yeah, I agree. And I do think one thing that, having started myself around possibly similar time to you, about 2010, maybe you're a little earlier than that, but that even then, that was only about 20-ish years after the material had been invented, and not that many people start working with it right away. So I think we've hit a really good kind of mass of great artists who have now been working with the clay for like 10 years or more. And the stuff that they're doing is just amazing. It's really, really worth just kind of Googling metal clay artists or silver clay art and jewelry, and just seeing some of this amazing work, especially from our tutors, of course, but also just generally what is out there. And also the people that are building businesses with metal clay, which hopefully we'll have on the podcast coming soon.
Spoiler alert. Brilliant. Yeah, so the next point, which I think is really cool, and actually this really drew me to metal clay at the beginning, because I'm obsessed with gemstones. I think everyone knows that. Most of us are, not all of us, but most of us. Beginners can do stone setting in metal clay, and in fact it was something that I learned on my very first class, and it's something that I teach when I was teaching this metal clay on the very first class. And I think I just love stone setting so much. I remember learning traditional ways and it was like, well, I'm not quite ready for that. And I wasn't ready, I was still breaking saw blades, trying to like saw out my basic charm. And I think, there are complex stone setting ways in metal clay, but a lot of them are not complex. So if you love working with stones, and not necessarily natural stones, is that we work with a mixture of natural stones, but we also work with fire in place stones, which are man-made kind of manufactured stones, which actually are becoming more and more popular nowadays, because there's this kind of debate, like, are they more eco-friendly because we're not taking out of the ground, or are the factories to make them? It's kind of like the jury's out on that one, but potentially it seems like more and more that process is going to be more sustainable. And, they look beautiful, they're wonderful to work with. And I think, with the changes that are happening in the economy as well, not everybody, I love fine jewelry, I love it, but not everybody wants to buy fine jewelry. And I think, but people like color, they like stones, they like that sparkle. And I think the way that we can work with metal clay is we can create these beautiful stone set pieces with relatively short periods of time, relatively inexpensive materials. We're able to price them appropriately, and they're not to compete with fine jewelry, they are a different thing. But I could see the demand for that kind of thing going up commercially, over the next few years based on how things are. So I think that it's a really good string to add to your bow to be able to create these kind of pieces, without it taking you weeks.
Yeah, and also in terms of equipment, a little plug for my first course I ever filmed, which was stone setting and metal clay, but it's torch fire techniques. So there are 3 different projects, but they're all fireable with a torch. And so, again, that's very accessible. You can get a creme brulee torch, you can get a cook's torch, you can get a jeweler's torch, and it's easy to do in your kitchen. So, like you say, it's something that's kind of more accessible at a more beginnery or beginner's level, starter level.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to set a stone, we do it in the 5 days of metal clay free course coming up next week. So have a go. It's a lot of fun. Number 9, we're getting through them. Love this one as well. It's easy to add gold to silver metal clay, and actually I'm obsessed with adding gold. I think I now don't really make pieces that don't have gold in because I've got a bit obsessed with gold. But yes, so Kaembu, which is an ancient Korean technique, which is used to add a very small layer of gold onto the top of silver, is really easy to do in metal clay. Because it's fine silver, you don't need to kind of prepare it. It's all ready to go. And it's fairly inexpensive to add layers of gold onto the silver metal clay. So if you like mixing metals, if you like seeing those pops of gold without adding a huge price tag or without it being difficult to do, no soldering required, even though we definitely encourage you to learn soldering and it's awesome. But we're all at different stages. I love soldering now, but there was a stage where I didn't, and I was like, I just want to do things that aren't too difficult for me, and play to my strengths. So Kaembu, there's also like a gold paste that is a little bit more expensive, but it is another option. So you can literally paint gold onto your silver work, and also we kind of use like little casting grain nuggets and set them like stones. So there's some really lovely ways to kind of mix metals with silver metal clay as well.
Absolutely. And I think I can't remember what our last point is, but so I'll mention my point now just in case it's not there. But one thing I've done before is, and if you're working in a business as a business and you're wanting to sell your pieces, this is definitely worth considering, is that I made pieces in metal clay and then I had them plated. So I've had rose gold plating, yellow gold plating. And the other thing I can do, again, because for a business, I can make it in the metal clay. And actually I tend to then make my own molds, and then can easily recreate it, so I can kind of keep the cost down. So I'm not making every single thing from scratch. But if you want to cast it in a different metal, like you mentioned before, you can send it to a caster and say, I want this in gold or in sterling silver or bronze or whatever it is you want to do it in. So, it's almost like it's a great starting point, but there's so much more that you can do with it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And that reminds me of, I remember we had a couple at London Jewelry School who we used to have a lot of people come and make their wedding rings, and the rings they wanted to make just was so much easier and more expressive to do in metal clay. So they made them in metal clay, but obviously having a wedding ring in metal clay is not ideal because it's fine silver, it will scratch over time, it's a softer material. So they then had them cast in gold. So, but to make that in gold would have been really, it wouldn't have really worked. So
you need like a three-year degree to do that in gold at least. It's not for a beginner who's just coming to do a wedding ring. Yeah, absolutely.
And they were very creative wedding rings. They were, a standard band you would always do using traditional methods, but they were, kind of had these really crazy, like funky organic designs, and it came out really well. So there's lots of options for where you can take it, once you've kind of learned those techniques. Number 10, and also we have a cheeky 11 because I just squeezed it in. Number 10, it works really well with adding color. So enamelling goes really well with metal clay. And actually we have a masterclass in enamelling with the amazing Joy Funnel, which I'm really excited about inside that 1-year diploma program. But because it's fine silver, again, it's much easier to enamel onto fine silver than sterling. It just works beautifully. You can use transparent enamels, which mean that underneath you can kind of see texture and detail. Have a look at Joy's work, you will see what we mean. And, you know, even if you just Google like enamelling a metal clay, I'm sure loads of stuff will come up. And because you have a kiln, so once you get addicted, because it's not if, but once you get addicted to metal clay after you've had a go, you're going to want to get a kiln. It is an investment, but it is well worth it, both in terms of a business expense and in terms of just if this is something you enjoy doing. It's that one big cost that you need to put out. And then, you know, I had my kiln for like 10 years until, you know, and then we were using it at the jewelry school every single day for like hundreds of people, and eventually it needs to be serviced and things. But pretty much, you know, as a solo person, it's going to last you. And you can fire lots of pieces all at the same time. If you're running a business, it's much quicker, so on and so forth. So you already have that investment, and that's what you need for enamelling. So they just go so well together, and you can add those pops of color and create things that just, you know, are really different, I think, and really stand out.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had my kiln for more than 10 years, touching wood, that is all good. And I have been fortunate to do some enamelling. And one of the great things about the metal clay, as you mentioned, you don't have to do anything sterling, you have to do things to it to make it enamelable. That's not a word, but anyway.
It is now.
It is now. What we can do, because it's a clay, is we can really easily make recesses in the clay, which once it's silver, we can add colour into much easier than doing that in sterling silver. So it's another thing that really lends itself to working with that. If you work with resins, you can do the same thing with coloured resins. Just on the kiln side, go yay for the kiln. You can do your metal clay, you can do different types of metal clays, because other metals, you know, can be kiln fired as well, like bronze and copper and sterling silver. You can do enamelling, you can do glass. So there's just, once you have your kiln,
never look back.
Your oyster.
I always remember buying my kiln, and I had just done like 3 classes in metal clay, so it wasn't a lot. It was just like 3 days, separate days, and I was like, I knew in my first class, I almost was like, I need to buy one now, and I was like, hold back, don't be so impulsive, like try it a few more times before you spend. And I just remember that moment of like pressing. I think we all have this moment with tools where we're like, you know you want it, you know you're going to use it, you know it's going to be great, but there's a bit of nervousness, like, is this okay? Can I spend this? And I just remember hitting like go, and it was sent to me. And ever since, you know, from day one, I was like, I have no regrets. This is one of the best purchases, you know, tool wise, that I've ever made. And yeah, didn't look back. So
I know we're not talking about kilns so much today, but jeweller's kilns are quite small. They're like the size of a microwave. Don't think pottery kiln. It's not.
No. You can keep it in your house. It's smaller than a microwave. I'm looking over at mine now. It's, you know, it doesn't use a lot of electricity. I think that's something that some people worry about a lot, but actually they've done lots of tests, and it doesn't use a lot of electricity for what it's doing. And it's really kind of safe and easy to use. So we have a whole podcast on kilns actually with Petra from Metal Clay Limited. So do have a look back at that if you're thinking of purchasing a kiln. Because you will need one if you're going to be addicted to metal clay like we are. So we have our bonus one, which both me and Anna can testify to, which is that metal clay is great for teaching. So if you are teaching jewelry making of any kind, or you're thinking about doing it in the future, this is one of the best things I think that you can teach, because it is, like we've said, easy to do from home, easy to get started, even to buy. Let's say you're going to have a class with 6 people in, 4 people in, 8 people in, to buy 6, 4 or 8 of the things you need is going to cost a lot less than most other kind of ways of working. You don't need a jeweler's bench. You can do it from just any kind of table. And it's so impressive. So for beginners, you know, as jewelers, we obviously, hopefully, learn to have some patience, and we know things are going to go wrong a lot as we're learning and developing. But when you are brand new to something, if you're teaching beginners classes, you want some quick wins for them. You want them to walk away feeling like, oh, I didn't think I could do that, and I can. And metal clay is really good for that, because it, you know, you can use cookie cutters, you can use texture tiles, you can pretty much set it up so that everybody, no matter who they are or what their background is going to make something that looks really awesome. So yeah, if you're thinking about teaching in terms of business models and things for growth, then metal clay is definitely up there with some of the best things to teach.
I just love it. It's my favorite day when I've got beginners coming in and learning things, and especially those people who say, oh, I'm not very creative. It's just lovely at the end to see people kind of wearing their creations home and how much they're able to make in a short period of time, and just that excitement of turning the clay into silver. It's brilliant. But as you say, it's also accessible. You don't need a jewelry studio. You can be around a kitchen table, or you can find a location. You don't need anything like special or fancy. And yeah, so it's great. Definitely agree with that.
Yeah, well, hopefully we have convinced you guys. You can obviously tell we're both obsessed. So we're very excited to be able to be doing these programs. If you are still intrigued and like, well, maybe they're both just crazy, I'm not sure, come and check it out. Join us next week for the 5 days of Silver Metal Clay. If you're away, or you can't do next week, sign up anyway. You can take it whenever you want. It's it's a standalone course. It's totally free, and we learn lots of things inside of it as well. There's a little trailer you can have a look out to find out more. And if you already know about metal clay and you just think, oh my goodness, I would love to spend a year working in metal clay, I would love to develop my techniques. I'd love to learn from some of the world's greatest artists and tutors, and I'd just love to develop my skills and my creativity. Then do come and join us on the diploma program. It is open to all. It is suitable for complete beginners, as well as people who have done metal clay and would like to just develop their skills and just make some more, have an excuse to do some making. Like all of our diploma programs, they're supported by mentors, and you're also part of a lovely community. So you will never be alone with your making. And we have Facebook groups and various things for support. So yes, the links to all of those will be in the show notes. And thank you, Anna, so much for coming and sharing your love for metal clay with us today. Anna teaches a lot on the diploma program. If you have a look at the curriculum, you'll be able to see all the classes that she teaches. And she's a wonderful tutor, really passionate about the subject, but also really breaks it down and covers a lot of the groundwork for things like ring making, and some of the more advanced classes as well. So there's going to be lots in there for you guys. So yes.
Yeah, I will say, I think it's just, there's so many really exciting projects in that diploma. I really think you look at it and go, wow, by the end of the year, what you'll be, where you'll be and what you'll have achieved is awesome.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what people do with it, because I feel like you'll learn the techniques, but you'll add your own flavor. And I think everyone's things will be totally different. And, I can't wait to see that. So yes, we will see you guys next week for the 5 days of metal clay. We'll also be back next week with another podcast episode. So thanks again to Anna. Thanks to everyone listening, and we'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.